When people are invited into my home, it usually involves food. When my family comes over, the most important thing is the food. And that requires some planning to make sure that you're going to have the right menu for your guests. Today's menu is going to be sous vide steak, roasted Brussels sprouts, roasted acorn squash, and an arugula and fig salad. All very seasonal and delicious foods that I've served many times. If I'm planning a dessert, I'll do that the day before, so I don't have to worry about that. If you're unfamiliar with what a sous vide is, I'm putting a link below in the description to a video that explains it far better than I could. It makes the absolute perfect steak. I will just tell you, once you've used one, there is no going back. I set the sous vide to 134 degrees, which makes a perfect medium rare steak. Mine is still a little bit frozen. It's going to be there for approximately 2 to 4 hours. And how do you know how long to do it? Whenever it's convenient to remove it. While the meat is cooking on its own, we start by setting the table with a beautiful antique linen tablecloth, some chargers to go into the plates, the dinner plates, the salad plates, the silverware including salad forks, bread and butter plates with the bread knife, the crystal glassware, some linen napkins with napkin rings, the candlestick holders, and I place the platter so I'll know exactly how much room it's going to need, even though it doesn't have the food on it yet. And I end by adding some flowers. My first chore as a young child was to set the table. And every meal had knife, fork, and a salad fork. We always had a salad plate. As soon as we got a little more civilized, we were given cloth napkins with our own napkin ring and our name on it. And then when we were safe, my mother lit the candles. And every meal, every dinner I should say, was like that. If my father came to my home and I had not put a salad plate on the table, he would ask for one or get up and get one himself. It just wasn't a meal without a salad plate, in his opinion. Once the table's set, it's a good time to go ahead and prep the vegetables. I cut the acorn squash from stem down, then I remove the seeds, and I've cut off where the stem is and that little pointy tip, and I'm going to slice it so it creates little scallops. And those are each about 3/8 of an inch. A 1/2 inch is too big, 1/4 of an inch is a little too narrow. So 3/8 of an inch is just about the right size. Once I have it all sliced, I put equal parts of olive oil and honey, and I stir that up. Now I'm going to dip the squash in, and believe it or not, the skin is edible once it's been roasted. I know the first time I made this, I kind of nibbled around it, and everybody else was eating it saying it was fine, and lo and behold, it was perfectly delicious. So if you're a brave person, try this. It's wonderful and delicious. So once everything has been tossed, then it's time to lay it flat on the cookie sheet. You want to make sure each surface comes in contact with the baking sheet. Once everything is laid out, then you sprinkle it with some salt, some fresh cracked pepper, and some chopped rosemary. I'm using fresh rosemary. You can use dried rosemary, and I usually, if it's dry, have dried rosemary, I put it in with the oil and the honey, or you can use maple syrup. And you can either put this directly in the oven or you can wait. It's going to take about 35 to 40 minutes to cook, so time it with your meal. The next thing I work on is my Brussels sprouts. Just sprinkle it with a little olive oil some salt, some fresh cracked pepper, and garlic to taste. If you're a real garlic person, go heavy on it, or you can go lighter. And then you're just going to toss this until all of the Brussels sprouts are coated with the oil. Then here's the hard part. You have to turn it over and make sure each little flat surface is in contact again with your baking sheet. By having it in contact with the baking sheet, this will help it to caramelize. This is going to take about 18 to 20 minutes, so you just time it with your squash. And when they're done, you can see how the caramelization has occurred. Consider when you want to serve dinner. The squash takes about 40 minutes, as I said, and the Brussels sprouts take about 18 to 20 minutes. So I plan it so that these are ready at the same time, and that's usually about 5 to 10 minutes before I serve dinner. So about 50 minutes before dinner starts, I put the squash in. I wait another 15 minutes and I put in the Brussels sprouts. That way they'll both be ready just about the same time, and it makes it easy. And I can take this time to go ahead and get ready for making the salad, or get myself ready if I don't look real great. I've got my skillet heating, and I've put a little pat of butter in there. And I've already put the rub on my steak that's come out of the sous vide. I wait for the butter to sizzle a little bit, and I put the steak in. All we're going to be doing is giving it a nice caramel brown color, a little saute on the outside. The inside is perfectly cooked. Now, while that is occurring, my oven is still warm. I would probably turn the oven off at this point and get my store-bought croissants, and I can put those in the oven. If I've turned the oven off, I can just kind of ignore these and they will get heated and crispy. And if an oven is still on, I want to go no longer than 6 or 7 minutes. I certainly don't want to burn them. To make my salad, I simply put in some olive oil, some balsamic vinegar, and a touch of honey, because this of maple syrup, because this actually is kind of a sweet salad with the figs in it, and a little bit, if I can get the lid off, about 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. And end by adding some salt and pepper, and I'm going to stir that together and making an emulsion. And so here's my salt. And well, nope, not going to do the pepper now. I need to turn that steak over. You can see how it's starting to caramelize on that side. The skillet's hotter now, so this is not going to take quite so long on this side. And oh, I better put the pepper in. I forgot the pepper, so here's my pepper. And I'm going to add my arugula. If arugula is too strong a flavor for you, you can also use a spring mix. And I'm just going to put in there however much I think my guests will eat. And I'm going to put in some fresh basil. It gives it a nice herby flavor. And then toss it. Whoops, except my steak is getting done, and these are so thick that I want to brown a little bit on the sides. So we're almost done with the steak, and I'm going to toss my salad. The more you toss it, the less vinegar and oil you need, which is kind of interesting. It'll kind of smear around and coat all the leaves. And if I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, I could use a little bit more arugula, and maybe my steak is done on that side. The skillet's nice and hot. So there's my fourth side, and that's cooking fast enough. I'm going to turn the heat off, and I think it's brown enough. And I'm just going to set that aside and let it rest a little bit, and we can slice that later for presentation. And a little more basil I think would be nice. And Then I've already pre-crumbled some gorgonzola cheese, which is really nice with the figs. And I've already chopped up my figs into quarters. And I'm gonna toss that all together. You do notice I've left behind some figs and some cheese because once I plate the salad, I'll add just a couple figs and a little bit of cheese on top, so I make sure it looks pretty on top. Now, I'm just about to forget something. Toasted pecans. I toast them at 350 degrees for about 7 minutes. I can do that the day before and keep it in my pantry, or as I'm preheating the oven before I cook the squash, I can do it then also. And I'm going to toss some in there, and this is all ready to plate. Now, to create this lovely platter, my husband slices this. He loves to slice the meat. I think the reason he loves to slice the meat is that he can secretly eat little nibbles of it. He's smiling because he's guilty, he knows it. And I put on one side of it, I've put the Brussels sprouts. On the other side, I've put the acorn squash and topped it with some fresh rosemary to have a little garnish there. You can even see the little blue flower from the rosemary. Makes a beautiful platter. I set that on the table, and I have plated the salad, put the rolls on the bread and butter plate, little fig and a little cheese and a little pecan on top so every plate looks perfect. And we're ready to go to the table. Now, if you're thinking, well, that's really nice, but a little unrealistic for my lifestyle, I'm going to show you what we did with the leftovers. We had quite a bit of leftovers, so the next day, I simply put out, rather than a tablecloth, some placemats. Rather than my china, I just put out my everyday dishes. I made some fresh salad. We ate up all the salad. And I pulled out a Wilton Armatel platter that I picked up at a thrift store for something like $3.99, and I've arranged our leftover meat, which I'm serving cold, and I've reheated the Brussels sprouts and the acorn squash. And this looks very similar to our dinner before. We even lit the candles. So it feels nice and festive. Now, if you're not a real big fig person, this salad is wonderful with pears, with fresh pears. And that's how I first made this salad, with fresh pears. If you don't have fresh pears or figs, it's really good with craisins. Even a meal as simple as hamburgers can be made special if you artfully arrange the lettuce, the tomatoes, the onions, the cheese, the hamburger meat. Put it on a pretty platter. Put the rolls in a basket. Make it look attractive. No matter what your meal is, you can make it attractive and fun. That's part of the challenge, is taking something that's not very appealing and making it look really nice. As always, the most creative solutions and the best stories begin with the biggest challenges. See you next time.